Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you may be. I want to thank everyone for joining the DataCore Storage Success Stories. Today, we're here happy to highlight Architectural Nexus, how they achieve fast application performance on time and on budget. This is the first of the series, so thank you all for attending. Looking forward to highlighting one of our customers and one of our partners, as we've got a pretty interesting, unique story to tell you guys here today. And this is really kind of dedicated to some other folks that might be dealing with certain challenges within their environment. So looking forward to getting into the weeds a little bit further today with my panel. I will introduce our partner and our customer and talk a little bit more about DataCore and how our solution was able to help play a role in this transformation. We'll get into the story on exactly what the challenges were that our customer Architectural Nexus was faced with, the solution, the outcome, and the results. So we'll get into that here in a bit so you can see today's agenda. And with that, I'll kind of walk through a little bit more about some of the speakers here and get into a little bit more about their companies. Myself, my name is Michael Chadwell. I am our head of channels here in the U.S. and happy to be accompanied by Kent Hansen, the Director of IT for Architectural Nexus, Steve Hunsaker here at DataCore, our Director of Systems Engineering, and Jonathan Kendrick of USI, who is our Partner of the Month, who helped us with this account and helped Kent really overcome a few challenges. I just want to highlight a few housekeeping rules for everyone here on the call. Today will be a panel discussion. I want to make sure everyone feels empowered to put a few questions in the chat window. You'll see that on the right. Today's presentation is being recorded and will be available on demand, which you'll be receiving an email from BrightTalk at the conclusion of the webinar. Also, please note that we do have a few attachments within today's presentation as well that you could take home with you guys here. There's a white paper describing this use case in a bit further detail. With that, I'm going to go ahead and kick things off, and part of the panel, I want to introduce to you guys Kent Hansen. Kent, if you would, please tell us a little bit more about your role and a little bit more about Architectural Nexus and the company itself, please.
Sure. So hello, everyone. My name is Kent Hansen. I am Director of IT for Architectural Nexus, as was stated. And what we do, we're an architecture company based out of Salt Lake City, and we have an office in Sacramento. And we basically are, we started in 1985. Recently, we have been very focused on green building and the Green Building Challenge. And so in order to walk the walk, rather than just talk the talk, we built our own office in Sacramento, California. And it was the first living certified building. And what that means, if you don't know what living certified is we give nothing to the city and we take nothing from the city. We produce all of our own energy. We capture our own rainwater and filter it for anything that's used in the building. And we give nothing back to the city in terms of sewage or anything else. It's all composted on site. So it's a true living building, and we produce 125% of the energy that we consume. That has led us to helping other customers and helping them develop and drive their energy model to reduce the energy consumption that is needed to run a building, if you will. And we help companies all over the United States. So that's what we do, and that's our challenge then was not only to build a building that was a living building certified, but also be able to work and do the work that we do, which is very heavily process and computer hungry.
Absolutely.
And with that, I'll hand it back.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to digging into that. And a lot of folks here on the call, some of you are in architecture firms yourself or in very data-intensive type environments. So we'll let Kent talk a little bit more about that here in just a minute. I want to turn it over and highlight our partner here on the call that works tightly with Architectural Nexus. Jonathan, if you would please introduce yourself, tell us a little bit more about Universal Systems and maybe a little bit about what excites you about today.
Thank you for that. My name is Jonathan Kendrick, and I'm the Director of Business Development at Universal Systems Incorporated, or USI. We specialize in doing OEM manufacturing and OEM builds. We do that for a variety of different customers, and sometimes we help them brand it. But we also have a brand of our own, our Universal line. And when it comes to that, we consider ourselves to be not just a manufacturer in that point, but we like to provide solutions and help our customers with whatever problems they're going to encounter and help them design the right architecture for their environments, which is where we kind of pick up the story where Kent and I got into the data core SAN and using that in his environment. I would be remiss if I didn't say that as an OEM manufacturer in a VAR, we had the opportunity to see a lot of different storage solutions, prepackaged solutions, boxes. We've vetted many different solutions, and when it came down to it, just with the feature set, the availability to put data core into any environment to build scalable solutions, both hardware and software, and meet the customer needs, that was a hands down for us partnering with Datacore about 8 years ago. And so we've built many architectures surrounding this storage solution and built SANs with that product.
Awesome. Yeah, well, thanks for that, Jonathan. And already getting questions in the chat, and happy to say that Jonathan with USI is helping us promote and run a Datacore user group in Salt Lake early next month on February 7th. So happy to have you on board, happy to have you and Kent chat about how we have really accomplished something pretty amazing there at Architectural Nexus. Before I get into the weeds a little bit further, I do want to just introduce Steve Huntsaker, our resident expert on software-defined storage here at Datacore. Steve, you want to tell everyone a little bit more briefly about us, and then we'll dig into a little more on the discussion with Kent?
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone, for attending. My name is Steve Huntsaker. I am the Director of Solution Architecture for the Americas, and I'm delighted to tell you more about Datacore and our product. To put it simply, for 21 years, we've been providing software to the world where they can bring their own hardware to the company, come bring their own hardware to the table. In this case, USI delivered them a super micro box. Because we've been doing it for 21 years, we believe we're the authority. We pioneered the technology that eventually led from what we originally called software-driven architecture to where the industry has decided to put us in a category called software-defined storage. We are worldwide. We have very many delighted customers. I think the 95% renewal rate speaks for itself. Wonderful customer base who's satisfied with not only what we're able to deliver them from performance and cost, but also eager to renew and continue to have the perpetual license that we offer. We're headquartered in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Actually, that's where I'm at right now, and meeting with all kinds of people who have energy and passion and really feel like we're one of the few manufacturers on the planet that is able to swim in blue water and really innovate the market and bring solutions like this that we deliver for Kent to the table. I want to just thank Kent. I've been working with him for a few years. He's a great guy, and looking forward to this presentation.
Awesome. Well, thanks, guys. So everyone, that is the panel for today. As Steve highlighted, we're grateful to have a local partner like USI. That's why we are 100% a channel company. We view our solution as that smart storage layer that can be used across various industries, and we partner up with the best channel partners we can that have that regional depth and insight to really work closely within their accounts and be essentially what is evolved into really the thought leader and essentially that trusted advisor like you'll see here at Architectural Nexus. So let's dig into the weeds a little bit, right? Let's talk about the storage success story, right? Let's talk about the problem and get right into it. So Kent, I think it would be helpful for you to kind of tell us a little bit more around your challenge. I know you said you started, I believe, what was it, in the late 80s, and kind of as the data explosion happened, what that did to you, your business, and really what kind of prompted this relationship to solve this challenge.
Sure. So back when I started for what is now Architectural Nexus, I think our full backup on tape was 35 gigabytes, and that was a lot of data back then. And now one project easily eclipses that with the amount of data that is produced when we do one project. And so as we grew, we came to this point where we had all of this, these data islands out on our network, and managing it became somewhat difficult, and it became obvious that we needed to move to a SAN solution. And so we started looking into different products, and I remember I've been buying hardware from Jonathan for how long, Jonathan? Probably 16 years now.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been a long time, and I remember asking Jonathan. I just ran. We were talking about it one day, and I said, "Yeah, we're gonna buy a SAN," and he said, "Well, you really ought to look at DataCore," and this is probably 8 years ago now. And at the time, I was like, I didn't understand the software-defined thing, and so we went with DataCore, one of their competitors, and for our primary data store SAN, and we ended up going with that SAN and ran that one for, I don't know, a year or so. But at the same time we were buying the SAN, we also found ourselves in a situation where we had 4 different offices. Actually, there was probably 5 at that time. And we needed to have users working on the same project at the same time and opening files. And so we started looking at how do we do that? And it was right about that time that Autodesk came out and they said, hey, you can run Revit, which is, building information management software, building information modeling software, and you can run that in Citrix. And so we started looking at Citrix. And, we were running, so we had our other SAN running, and we had VMware running on that. And then we started going into the Citrix route. And we had already dropped a lot of money on this competitor. It was expensive, and it was running, but we now found ourselves in a situation where we needed to have these teams working on these projects, and we needed to have I would call it a virtual team, if you will, and because we would have people in Sacramento working on projects in Salt Lake and vice versa. And different drafters would come up and have a different, time schedule and be able to, have some time free available. Well, how do we get them working, in Sacramento? How do we get them working on the project in Salt Lake and drafting going on? So Citrix became the obvious solution. And as we started looking into Citrix and what was required there, we realized we needed some fast storage. And so we went down and bought basically a bank of 15,000 RPM hard drives. And I want to say we bought 6 of them or 8 of them on our first go around. And it ran one or two users really well. We could actually even get it up to about 10 users, and nobody complained. But when we started pushing it harder than that, boy, the moaning you could hear from, across state lines. It was pretty bad how slow it got rather quickly. And I happened to be back down talking to Jonathan again about some more hardware, and he brought up DataCore again, and I thought, well, and Jonathan, to his credit, said, let's just do a pilot. What's it going to hurt? All right, you come out and do a pilot, and he came out and did his pilot, and the moaning kind of died. It went away, and we were able to add more people to the SAN, and to this little, and basically it was taking software and laying it over hardware that we'd already purchased, and it was enterprise class hardware, but it wasn't a SAN. But by purchasing DataCore and laying it over the top of it, it suddenly became a SAN, and I at the time didn't realize how powerful it was. As we started to grow, we started, more and more people, hey, can I get a desktop here? Can I get a desktop there? One day, I don't know how long it was ago, but I started noticing that the IOPS on our SAN were routinely hitting 55,000 IOPS. And then one day, to my surprise, we hit 372,000 IOPS on our SAN. On this little SAN that, was almost an afterthought that just blew me away. And so at the same time, this data was exploding on our compellant, and we needed to start to expand that. And I'm moving, I'm kind of hopping years here, so if you need me to back up, whatever.
No, you're fine. And the odd thing is we had to upgrade the data on our other SAN. I'm sorry, we need to have more storage added to it because we were running out of terabytes. So I called our reseller and I said, hey, give me a quote to bump our 2 terabyte drives to 4 terabyte drives. And when I got the quote back, I almost fell out of my chair because it was more than what I had paid for DataCore and for the hard drives in my DataCore SAN. In fact, it was 4 times the going rate of a hard drive is what the quote came back as. And I called them up and I said, I think there was a mistake. And they're like, no, you have to understand, these are grade A hard drives right off the press, and you get the cream of the crop. And well, if I'm getting the cream of the crop, why are they failing at twice the rate that my DataCore SAN? I was losing, for every drive I was losing on my DataCore, I was losing 2 on my other SAN, and, changing those out. And we were hitting them harder. And so, things progressed a little bit more. And so I said, you know what, we're going to hold off on upgrading that. We'll move the data off to the side and store it in a different area. And we started an archive process to do that. And then it came time to, it was not too long ago, I was told that our SAN, competitor SAN, was end of life, and it was going to go end of support, and I needed to basically forklift the hardware. Let's stop there. Yeah, let's stop there, Ken. Yeah, I was going to say, let's stop there, Ken. I just want to kind of recap what I've heard and kind of get Steve's take on some of this as well. So, I think that this story is really interesting, right? Because you said as your business scaled, collaboration was a necessary point. And in order for folks to be able to, download files, work on projects across cities, across geographies, these files were getting bigger. And it was essentially a strain on, it all fell on you and your team to essentially produce. And after inserting DataCore and through USI's direction, your guys and specifically your architects, which most people know are not are not cheap headcounts by any means. We're sitting around waiting to, download files or open files or save files. Well, now all of a sudden they're able to collaborate faster.
Let me talk to that for a second, because that's an interesting point, because at one point we've been opening AutoCAD files, 1, 2, 3 megabyte files, and they would open and work on them and then save and that. Now in Revit, because it's all, done in can be turned, into 3D models and whatnot, we're now opening files that are 300 meg to 500 meg. It's not unheard of to get to 600 megabits. And when you click on open that file, well, you could have up to 6 to 8 people opening that 600, 500 meg file. That's a lot of data moving across and coming off the hard drive suddenly. A lot more than the 1 or 2 megabytes that were coming off prior to. So it became a real problem of hurry up and wait.
Yeah.
And
then I was just going to turn it over to Steve. Steve, what does that do from a density perspective, or why does software-defined fit well within an architecture like this?
I think it goes back to the original baited hook I was trying to proffer up, which is the fact that our software is perpetual. You own it forever. And to just say it simply, when you look at Kent and his purchase of Compellent, you're buying let's face it, guys, the storage arrays out there that you can go buy, you're really paying them for their software and really not their hardware, though they were really trying to get Kent for the price tag for their hardware. But the point is that they're all using commodity hardware. They're likely not manufacturing any of the hardware. They're just putting a price tag on their array with their software, and that's how they're making their money. So in this case, because DataCore is truly built with ultimate flexibility in mind, DataCore Sound Symphony can ingest or aggregate together any fiber channel or iSCSI or direct attached storage into one pool. So it matters not if you're using direct attached storage or a Compellent or XYZ or ABC array. And so you can grow it out using the environment you have, build the capacity with commodity drives, as Kent indicated, scale up very effectively, and then
and you lose no performance. You lose no performance.
That's right. And I think it's important for you, Kent, to kind of spotlight that consolidation ratio going up. But if I can add, go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that I get to choose now that we're fully DataCore. I get to choose when my hardware goes end of life, not somebody else. Does that make sense? Like I can go buy as many hard drives as I want, and I can run those as long as I want to, and DataCore doesn't care. I can call them up and get help with their software on drives that are 10 years old, and they'll still help me. I don't have to just because some sand manufacturer says, hey, you're end of life and you're end of support. Does that make sense? What I'm trying to say?
Oh, absolutely, Jonathan. I would even ask you the question. How does that help your business, right? I mean, as a reseller and someone who's a strategic account advisor, I mean, how does that story help you?
Well, to be honest, it can hurt my business too, because if I get to resell the software over and over, there's more revenue. That's a completely different revenue stream that we're not tapping into because we're not charging our customers. It's to be honest with you, we would probably make a lot more money if we were selling any other brand besides DataCore from the reseller point of view. But we wouldn't be giving our customers we wouldn't be giving them the best solution. We wouldn't be helping them manage their budget. And we wouldn't be giving them a completely scalable solution that they are in control of.
Yeah. And I mean, by creating that trust like you have with Kent, as he said, he decides when he's up for hardware refresh, you know he's going to come back to you, right?
That's true. And so we get to take care and we get to help on the hardware side. But because DataCore is a perpetual license, I'm not reselling him the software side and grouping it together with the hardware as one package, which allows him every time he refreshes that hardware to reap those rewards and benefit on the cost of ownership on that over and over. And I think, Kent, in your situation, you probably refreshed your hardware, is it 2, or would this be the 3rd time now?
I think so, yeah. When we started into this, when we hit 385,000 IOPS, that was more like 372,000 IOPS to be precise, but we were running 15,000 RPM drives. Right now, our first tier, and that's a whole other thing we can talk about is you know, the key features and what we actually brought in by using DataCore. But our first tier is SSD now, and everything, every write and every read, if it's not cached in RAM, you know, hits SSD first. And you know, we decided when that happened, and there wasn't any extra expense to it. We went down and bought the SSD drives, I guess was the expense to it, and made sure we had the licensing to do that from DataCore and installed it. And it's kind of painless to do.
And if I can add to that, on top of that, you mentioned that we did throw some SSD in there. That's not just for your storage part. Whatever technology comes around, something that's not even invented yet, as long as it'll plug into a PCI Express slot, we have the availability to grow that box while it's still in place. It's not a closed box that you put in a closet and forget about it. We can continually improve that as the industry puts forward faster components.
So let's talk about that for a second, because what our next step, because we have SSD, our next step is NVMe, which I'm debating when and where, you know, at what point we move to that. Right now, so like I said, somebody comes along and they say, hey, well, I need to open up this 500 megabyte file, and let's you know, on our competitor stand, a lot of that would come straight from disk, and it was fast disk, and it, you know, but it still took a long time to open. And when you open that first file, DataCore, and correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, I don't want to give anybody any misinformation, but DataCore then caches that file in RAM. And I have, you know, I think the amount of cache that I had in the competitor's SAN was 8 gig or something like that. It was not high. The amount of cache that I have in my DataCore is 64 gigabytes of cache. That's because it's software defined. I get to choose what that is. And so that first person comes along, they open it up. If it's a recently used file, it'll come off of the SSD RAID and get loaded into cache. The next guy that comes along, and if that file is, you know, still in cache, it pulls it right out of RAM. And you know, I've seen on a routine basis, I've seen our production server delivering, you know, 3 gigabits to 2.4 gigabits worth of data on our 10 gig network, you know, out to our Citrix SAN for people to open. So, you know, when it comes to software defined, the granularity and control you have is so far beyond what you get with, you know, these canned solutions. That, you know, back to our competitor, and you guys can cut me off any time, but we had a situation where we had purchased, you know, I think it was 26 terabytes or 24 terabytes of data. Well, we weren't getting anywhere close to that, and so, you know, I call them up and I'm like, hey, what's going on? They look at it and said, oh, well, for you to migrate your data from tier 1 down to tier 3, we have to take a daily snapshot and store that snapshot, and then we start migrating the data overnight. Well, that was consuming data or storage that I needed for my production data, which was the impetus for me to go ask for an upgrade of our hard drives. So in order to make it so that we could get more data out, or more storage out of our SAN, I had to go delete some of these snapshots. Well, you start looking at what DataCore brings to the table. You know what? I don't need a snapshot to run tiering. It does it on the fly as you read and write data. And as older blocks become less hit and less used, it automatically moves it to slower and less expensive disk. However, if I want to snapshot something, I could write a script in DataCore that would snapshot my volumes whenever I wanted them to and store it for, on different volumes if I wanted to. So I didn't lose the ability to snapshot, but I also don't lose any storage in the auto tiering of my data. And so that became a plus for us when we started to really compare the two. And then we realized is DataCore has something called continuous data protection. And that's a feature that you can actually, like on my DataCore SAN, I could roll back to any given point in time in the last 2 weeks to bring up a volume and get data out of that particular time point. And go ahead.
I had someone say that the audio had cut off. However, I can hear everybody. Oh, okay. Back online. All right. Just making sure. I wanted to make sure that we didn't lose audio there. Didn't mean to cut you off, Kent. But I guess since I did, Steve, do you want to maybe highlight a little more on what Kent's talking about here from moving different tiers of storage and caching to RAM and what that means? I mean, I know Kent just described it a bit, but maybe tell us a little bit more around what is going on behind the scenes there.
Sure. SAN Symphony, which is the name of our product, does not use disk to cache, where I think we find ourselves pretty unique in that arena, where we actually use RAM to cache reads and writes. And of course, you have to get it out of volatile memory and write to disk. And so what Kent was talking about, these tiers of storage, indeed, we can place differing performing drives into the same pool, which is kind of contradictory to tradition. And now you build your own tier structure from fastest on to slowest. And when we destage and then write to disk, we write to tier 1, and then our auto tiering is in real time. It's not using a cron job or a schedule to dictate when or how those blocks of storage are being moved, whether they be promoted or demoted up and down the tier stack. So really, I mean, Kent, talk to us about how you manage auto tiering.
So for us, we have 3 tiers of data, and so people know in DataCore you can do up to 15 tiers. And that's what when I say you decide when your drives become obsolete. I mean, you have 15 tiers to work with. So so just a brief, what's auto tiering? Auto tiering is you're using at the bit level, you're spreading your virtual drives across different types of media. So, for example, tier 1 for us is SSD. And we have, I think, 8 SSD drives. And then we drop down to our next tier, which is 10,000 RPM drives. And we have, several terabytes of that. And then when that, if the data gets too old and it gets pushed down, it drops down to 7,200 RPM SATA drives. And so we're running 3 tiers. And if you want to count RAM as a tier, I don't know if you would necessarily, because and so we're just going to say right now that we run 3 tiers of storage. And you have to understand that, let's say you have a large file, or I don't know, maybe maybe an Exchange database that's very large or something like that. And that Exchange database actually would go from, it could, in theory, go from our SSD drive and run vertically down through our 10,000 RPM drive and then drop even into our 7,200 RPM drive, depending on which blocks or which bits we're getting written and read to continuously. So it stores the data that's continually getting hit. It automatically moves it to the fastest storage that you have, your tier 1. And you get to set that on, and let's say tomorrow I go out and I say, hey Jonathan, I need a bank of NVMe drives, and we plug that in. Well, then I go in and I plug that in as SAS attached or however I want to attach it, and then I say this is my new tier 1, and then DataCore readjusts all of my data so that I have a tier 1, a tier 2, a tier 3, and then I would have a tier 4 at my 7,200 RPM. Does that answer your question? Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah, I think that's very insightful, and I'd ask you to take it maybe a step even further out from a user perspective, or the architects, or we'll call them your customers at the end of the day, and projects. How does that improve their lives, like from an application perspective?
Oh,
what does that mean?
Yeah, so let's say we have a project, and these people have a project, and they're creating visual files, large Revit model files. That data in that project directory is automatically stored vertically across those tiers, across those 3 tiers. However, they go in, they open up that Revit file, and it's pulling. If it was a file that had been opened up in the last couple of days, we're not sitting around waiting for that file to be opened up 6 times from disk and possibly slow disk. It's loading it into RAM cache, and the next person that comes along and hits it, it's dropping on the wire as fast as computer technology can drop it on the wire to get it to them. So their file times, their open times, and you have to understand that the Revit model, as far as I understand it, is basically a compressed file of thousands of compressed files. And so there's a lot of computing. I mean, our typical VM in Citrix, and with the NVIDIA grid and whatnot, we run anywhere from, we give them 4 to 8 threads to the processor. We give them 16 gig to 24 gigs of RAM, and then we give them a slice of NVIDIA GPU, and that we can put about, and the servers that we have the E5, they're 32 threads or cores, if you will. We can get about 20 users per server. And then we run not out of hard disk capacity or speed. The latency stays where it needs to stay. What we run out of is CPU cycles. The processors, they're 3.3 gigahertz processors. They simply cannot do anymore. And I get alerts daily about some of our Citrix and desktop servers running at 90% utilization. So nice. And quickly, I did have a question here in the chat. They were just curious, what was the server config that hosted the metrics with DataCore? What was the server config that hosted the metrics for DataCore? In other words, they want to know what the CPU was and the RAM and all that?
The Citrix config, Kent.
Oh, the Citrix config was an E5, and I think it was they're 3.3 gigahertz. I don't know the exact model. They have.
I believe they were the 2670 E5 2672. You had 2 in each one.
Yeah, and we had anywhere from 512 gigs of RAM to 768 gigs of RAM per server.
And then, Kent, we also have another question asking the other side of what is the DataCore config for the servers?
The DataCore servers they're built out of Supermicro servers, and I'll give you, I don't know the exact model numbers anymore. There are 2.6 gigahertz processors, the E5 series. They have 10 drives. So we have two heads. So we have an active SAN. So there's that. We run actually two SANs. And by the way, we run those two SANs for less than what it cost us if we were going to forklift and upgrade the competitor SAN. We run those two SANs for less than what it costs to do that. And they're active. And in the middle of the day, I can turn off a SAN and nobody knows because of the way the data core functions. But on those two heads, I call them heads that run the actual data core software. We have two mirror drives that boot the data core head server, and then 8 2.5-inch SSE drives that are mirrored, and that becomes my tier 1. And then there's a SAP attachment into a JBOD, and both of those servers drop into two different JBODs of 2.5-inch drives, and then it drops from there into another SAS attachment into the 3.5-inch drive JBOD.
And if I can point out, I know, Kent, that we've done a couple editions, 2 or 3 editions, where we've added shelves and put in different boxes and moved your tier 1, moved the drives, replaced them, and you've been doing this for 6 years. And if I can ask a question, and this could be dangerous because I don't know the exact answer, have you ever been down?
No, not with data core. Not with
there we
data
go.
core.
That's what I was. That's what I was hoping you were going to say.
Yeah, not with data core. Any maintenance and stuff like that, it's you with data core you say I'll take this my left or my right side, or you can have up to, I think, how many, what is it, Steve, 16 nodes or something like that, and you can spread out horizontally as well, but we only run 2 of them.
Yeah.
But
is that
very powerful.
SCSI or fiber channel?
We run fiber channel. We run fiber channel. We do. So we run both, to be perfectly honest. In between the mirroring that happens between the two servers is 10 gig iSCSI, and then we have fiber channel out to the VMware servers.
Thanks.
Kent, I just want to remind you of a story. I don't know if you remember this or not, but it was 4 or 5 years ago. You called me up in the middle of the day just to say that you were reviewing your data core logs, and you had seen where you had users accessing up to 325,000 IOPS, and nobody called you. Nobody complained. Yeah. Nothing slowed down. Nobody even noticed that you guys were having a storm like that.
Right. Yeah, I remember that one. And just in full disclosure, that 325,000 IOPS was not a typical everyday occurrence. It would hit high occasionally. That one was exceptionally high. Our typical run rate is not unusual to hit 25 to 55,000 IOPS, depending on what's going on.
Would you say it's fair? I love hearing stories like that, but when I think of this story, right, we say increased performance. That sounds like helps you sleep at night, helps your company scale, right? You guys can effectively take on more projects as you hire new architects and continue to build these living buildings. It essentially helps you have the stability to reach that performance. The high availability component, right? So making sure business continuity is enabled. Jonathan just highlighted it's been 6 years or so, and no downs, no outages with data core running on the back end. And from a cost efficiency
with commodity hardware, the point is we've ran 6 years, no outages, and with commodity hardware. And for us, if there's any question. The competitor SAN that I've mentioned or referred to, I will say right now is no longer in our. Well, technically it's still in our data track, but it's turned off. We no longer even use it. We're complete data core all the way through. The ROI and the complete total cost of ownership on it is so much less and such a in my opinion, a better package. The only thing we're doing in the future is moving data core. Our next steps are this year are we're going to be looking at asynchronous replication to replicate the data, off of our network. So, people understand we have a BGP network and we have a huge generator. Power goes out, we stay up. We've lost power several times. We're always online. We have BGP. We have two different internet providers providing that for us, and so our next step is we are our own cloud, and we're going to be replicating our data with data core off to our remote site. And so for us, data core is just going to become more and more of our piece of production and business, and we'll rely on it more and more. If you stop and email software defined, what happens when you want to move your data out to Microsoft's Azure or you want to run a SAN out in Amazon? Well, if you have software defined, that there's an opportunity there, and maybe you can talk to that, Steve, a little bit, but I think it's supported now, isn't it, Steve, to run that software out in those environments?
Right, because our software is simply software that installs on a Windows Server, wherever a Windows Server resides, whether it's your garage or a cloud manufacturer, it doesn't matter.
If you build your own virtual SAN out in Microsoft's Azure cloud or Amazon, I suppose. So if you want to relearn, different SANs, I would, use different competitors. But if you want one solution, my money is on DataCore. So.
Awesome. We got a few questions here. I think we've done a pretty good job of painting the story out so far. So any of you that have questions, please feel free to go ahead and continue to put those in the chat. One of the questions, any experience using large arrays such as EMC VNX behind DataCore?
No, not directly, but I will say that I believe with the caching algorithm that it would make it faster. I did have, and somebody from DataCore told me that there was one of the competitors wanted to use DataCore as their sort of active because they couldn't do active. They could only do active passive. But if you fronted that with DataCore, you could do active. So I personally don't have any experience with the MC or VNX, but I do.
Well, and I can tell you,
go faster.
I was going to say, Jonathan. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. We do have experience on that, and that you can put an EMC or Unity, or you can put anything you want behind there, Azure storage. And I know that I won't steal the thunder here, but I know one of DataCore's largest customers. It's not somebody that I was involved with, but they are running on EMC. Isn't that correct?
That's correct. Yep.
Yep. I didn't know if you wanted to add anything else there, Steve, or if you're comfortable, do you have anything to add there before I move to the next question?
No, that's simple. Anything that's fiber channel or iSCSI or direct attach can run behind DataCore, and we continue to provide our features, and the respective products underneath continue to bring their best features to the table, and we're all good. Still there?
And to be able to run that in case the first site goes down, and we're actually going to use commodity hardware and build something up in a super micro box, saving the cost of having to purchase the third EMC.
Nice. Getting a bunch of questions flooding in here. Any suggestions for the best way to maintain the storage in good shape to prevent disaster happening?
Who do you want to attack?
I'll jump in there. I'll jump in there. I'm happy to respond to that. You know, we do, and I'm going to try, if it's okay, I see the questions coming in. I'm going to try and tackle as many as I can here in one fell swoop. The data core software resides on Windows Server, and so, you know, you can take that as you want with Windows updates. We have a wonderful support site that can guide you through what hotfixes from Microsoft have done to Windows and whether or not you should be concerned with it. In other words, how close you should be to the cutting edge. I think to Kent's point of being able to test an update, whether it be a driver or firmware or something there, and maybe Kent, you can allude to that, but being able to tackle that on one side of the two sides is very comfortable and confident knowing you're not going to bring down your entire SAN, because we do have data in two distinct places. So I would say, in answer to that question, you know, perfectly fine to look after drivers, firmware, Windows updates, data core releases, product service packs, a handful of times a year, where we're obviously doing some improvements and even releasing new features. And then I saw a question about licensing. Happy to take that. Is that okay, Michael, if I just kind of fire away at these?
Yeah.
And taking the time to go bounce.
People are asking if this will be, you could get a copy of this afterwards. So yes, you will be able to download this. But go ahead. Sure.
So we license by terabyte of usable capacity. So if you have 50 terabytes that you want to use, we would provide you with a quote for 100 because we mirror that 50 to another server, and that totals 100. How does DataCore compare to Datrium? Datrium is very different in terms of they actually provide, I believe, a driver that provides storage to VMware. We actually are capable, and I don't think Datrium can do this. I can take a fiber channel LUN, an iSCSI LUN, direct attach storage, and aggregate that all together. And as we've already painted that picture, auto tier it. We read and write in cache in RAM, and we are then capable of not only some other questions have alluded to being hyper-converged, which the way we define it is actually giving storage to the very host that I am standing on, but also while we're doing that, being perfectly capable of serving up that disk to an external environment at the same time, which I don't believe Datrium can do. Let's see here.
Will DataCore run on top of any piece of hardware or any that they don't?
I saw that, yeah. So any x86 server we work really well with, the likes of Lenovo, Supermicro, HP, Dell. We do have a few documents that will point out what does not work. That's probably a good way to approach that, rather than just publishing something with everything that works. It's easier to find the exceptions. Perfectly happy to provide any labs that you may need. We do have a trial software for 30 days that's fully functional. We do offer discounts for nonprofits. We have reference architectures on our website built for several of most all of the server hardware manufacturers. We run on Windows Server, and so in order to run on VMware or Linux, we would be a virtual machine. Thin provisioning is actually something that we invented and have a patent on. So yes, we support thin provisioning and offer that. In other words, our virtual disks can be greater than the pool that you have beneath. And Am I missing anything else? Yes, Kent. Yes.
Can I just throw in there that, data core is, and this is when I really drank the Kool-Aid, is data core is no Johnny-come-lately to storage. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't the beginning at NASA years ago? They started from NASA. I think the engineers started from NASA and grew it from there. I mean, it's been around for a long time.
That's correct.
So, very, very trusted.
Michael, am I missing any questions that you'd like to have me follow up on?
So yes, everyone will get a copy. Differentiators from leading competitors. I'll take that one a bit. I think you kind of heard today, because we're software only, we can run on any hardware. Ideally, you're going to get, better cost. We're definitely going to help with that. The efficiency component that we've just heard Kent talk about, additional performance. But most importantly, and someone was asking about industries or verticals that we succeed in, pretty much any high data intensive environment, especially anything mission critical with high availability or business continuity. When I look at verticals, I think of hospitals. I think we have over 2,000 hospitals that rely on data core to ensure that their data is always up and always running. When Hurricane Sandy hit, we actually had a hospital whose data center went underwater. These guys are in New York, and thank goodness that they had the active architecture, and their other data center across the Hudson was actually up, running, fully functional. That hospital was admitting patients. People were able to run their MRIs and deal with all of the other kinds of surgeries and issues and complications that came because of the storm, whereas others, were down. So see that a lot. Request a quote. Feel free to reach out to, let's see, I believe our contact info is in here somewhere. We'll make sure to send you out our contact info. It's right here on this last slide, info@datacore.com. Feel free to shoot a note out to any of us here on the webcast. For me, it's michael.chadwell@datacore.com. Wanted to also tackle, what was this last question here? Anything else I should have mentioned there, Steve?
No, I mean there's a handful of questions that we probably can tackle. I don't know if we know who it was that asked it, but there's a lot we haven't answered, guys, and I appreciate your contribution. My email address is steve.hunsaker, HUNSAKER @datacore.com. Happy to answer any and all that you may have.
Yep. And as mentioned, this is kind of the beginning of a web series here, so please join us for the next one. We'll have another customer come on, tell you how they use data core with another one of the partners that is more in the central region with the customer First Basis Consulting on February 26th.